So please go and look at CCE. There you will be able to find a lot of thought processes, lot of emphasis is being given to the whole experiential learning concept, the leadership part of it. How do you try to make your own class? How do you develop your own class rules? And when we went to Finland for the first time, I think we really wanted to say, oh, this is great. There is a phenomena-based learning. There is the experiential learning. Everything is happening. But we really need to understand all these practices have been happening in India for years together. Maybe to I would not like to blame the Britishers, but all these thought processes, what came in over a period of time, shifted the focus. Education became more specifically for a role, specifically for a job, specifically for one particular thought process as such. So we have to be kind of looking at that, how much percentage of this and how much percentage of this combination is something which really need to be understand. So when we went to Finland, there again we saw something called as home economics part of it, and I will touch upon when we try to talk about the skill and what OECD is talking about little later. But we really need to understand that today's conversation, whatever we are trying to talk about experiential learning, please don't try to look at one size fit all. It is when you try to talk about experiential learning in a corporate world, it may have a different perspective. In a higher education, it may have a different perspective. In a school sector, it may have a little different perspective. In a play school, it may be a little different. Again, when you try to look at in subjects, you really need to see that how do you connect it different. But today's our interaction is going to be specifically focused on school. And predominantly what we'll be looking at the process, the approach, the measurement. Because if you don't understand the process, approach, and measurement, I think we will not be able to understand this whole thought process of experiential learning. But I think the teachers who are there on this particular call with me will surely agree with me that philosophically what we say is that no school is supposed to teach any child. No school is supposed to teach any child. The child will decide what format, what particular way he or she will choose the learning styles. And today, that's why when we try to find out, there is a lot of conflict with a lot of younger teachers who are trying to get into and say, oh, children are not at all listening to us. But we really need to look at the past. So while we look at the past, we also need, for the sake of this particular discussion as such, we need to put one definition to say, okay, this is exactly what we are trying to look at it. So when we try to talk about experiential learning, it is more strategic, active engagement of students in, how do we create opportunities to learn by doing and reflecting on doing. So there are two components, by doing and reflecting on these activities, which will empower him or her to apply all these theoretical knowledge when he steps out of his home, when he's working in his own home. And we really look at in different kind of scenarios. When he goes to supermarket, how he's supposed to be there. When he goes to the airport, how he's supposed to be there. When he goes to a mall, how he's still supposed to get. When he goes to a village, how he's supposed to. Temple, church, mosque, it can be different settings. And all this requires, when we try to talk about experiential, three important perspectives: cognitive, emotional, and physical standpoints. We really need to understand. And just to put it in a very simple thing, it is all about experiencing activity, reflecting on this particular thing, and then trying to think how exactly I'm going to use it and then act upon it. And please understand it, when we try to talk about it, it happens to a child internally. It also happens to the external world, which is experiencing outside. And this is where, see, just for the sake of, not making this session much more theoretical, but I think sometimes people say, thoda bahut naam lena is very, very important. Like David Klopp basically talks about, an American theorist, basically, he talks about that learner must be willing to be actively involved in the experience. If he or she is not actively involved, experiential learning will not happen. Second, he or she should be able to sit back and reflect what exactly happened in this particular transaction. And I'll give you one example to just help you to look at it. Third part is that he or she must possess and use these analytic skills to conceptualize and experience, okay, this is exactly what it means. And then possess the decision-making and problem-solving skills. Now let's look at our own history. Imagine, I think we were children, we were small kids at that particular time. We might have not known all these concepts, philosophies, and other part of it. But we really need to understand the first time when we started walking or crawling, and when we first time when we stood, I think we really need to understand we had a fall. So what did we learn immediately? Just to ensure that I need a hand, and I holded my father's hand or a mother's hand, my uncle's, my didi, my bhaiya, my relative's hand, and then I started walking. So I decided that that time I never bothered about the gravity. Where is the center point of gravity? All these concepts were not known to us, but we have been experiencing them in one or the other way. And this is where I think Paul Ferreira says very beautifully. He says this is all about banking concept and education, where he says all experiences you deposit. Keep taking it and keep depositing, and then use them as appropriately in a given situation. And that's why he says it is more of a depositing and withdrawing, and he talks about this. But we should be very clear. We should be very clear that while we are going through an experiential education, we are not only consuming information, we are also creating information. That's where, when students in our classrooms are there, they try to look at every teacher. They try to look at every teacher and then say, okay, if I have to irritate Sendil sir, I have to make this comment in the classroom and I'm done. The whole classroom will get disturbed because he will get emotional. As a teacher, we are also not only consumer of information, we are also creator of information. So we have to be very, very, clear. And I think medical research also talks about that whenever experiential learning happens, there are physical changes to the brain. I think we need to note this particular point very critically, that if we need to give a lot of experiences, a lot of moments, and then this becomes as part of our balance sheet quite well. And in this particular stage, when we try to talk about the teacher's role becomes very, very important. The teacher, first and the foremost, is he or she is a subject expert, whatever subject it can be. It can be math to a second language, to a third language, to a art, to a music. He or she must have the depth in the subject. Then only you are able to understand it better. Because once that particular subject is there with you, you're a subject expert, then you start, people start benchmarking and saying that, okay, this particular guy knows his subject and he knows how to evaluate it. Today, most of the schools have this particular problem where teachers are giving assignments on vacation homework. What happens? You say every day write one, take a chart and write your experiences, not in your own words, but you have to put pictures, add something, and just come in and give it. Why are we not talking about something called as pop-up museums? Because we as teachers, we don't know what are the assessment rubrics. We don't know what experiments this particular child did on a soluble and non-soluble things. By making a lemonade at home, how he or she is able to understand how things happen. I'm not very sure about it. So we really need, a teacher has to be a subject expert. Second is he or she needs to be looked at, as a good assessment, rubrics he or she should be able. And third important thing is that he is more a facilitator of the knowledge. He is the facilitator in the initial part of it, and then he has to change his role from facilitator to a coach. And this is where I think these are the roles which teachers really need to look at. In my limited experience over the years and while traveling, across different kinds of country, when we talk about any concept, whether it is experiential or anything else, I think the first and the foremost thing what I have felt is that design issues. People don't even know how to design an experiential education or experiential education in the classroom. And the first and the foremost thing when we go and do workshops in schools, you know what people say? They say, oh, it takes too much of time. It's time consuming. We don't know, parents want marks and everybody is trying to talk about. So there is a design issue, what I think. Design issue with the total objectives to be achieved as part of that particular program or that particular course or that particular subject, that particular chapter. And I'm sure that there are CBSE principals whom I can see on the screen. They will be still saying that still these teachers are struggling to write a good learning objective, learning outcomes. People don't know. And even if they know, the third important thing which comes is that their assessment, they are doing it for total different. So this is where the first and the foremost challenge is. There's a design issue, whole design issue. The second is lack of awareness and what's happening in other subjects. I may be a guru or I may be a guru in one particular concept, but I don't know how do I connect to all this. And that's where I think the teacher is very, very important, because what I personally, being teacher for almost what 50, yeah, 15 years as a teacher, 13 to 15 years to be precise, in between this particular practice being a teacher, I think one thing which we have seen is that we love our subject. We are very passionate about our subject. We don't know how to take this concept to a market. We don't know how to take this concept to a, a scenario. I think this is where something which teachers also really need to look at it. So one is they don't know the concept in depth, and then trying to connect it connection with the other stuff. The third important thing is that the supporting infrastructure. People always think that if you have to create experiential learning, you have to spend more time. Management may not give you the money. Management may not, and that's where I think organizations like Prabal and EduBio are trying to also see that, okay, what are the things available? And my request to this organization is, both the organization is also going to be, from my perspective, is going to be that we really need to understand that we are not trying to put a one-to-one kind of a thing, which many service providers are trying to do in the country today. They say for standard one, these are the three experiments you can do. Excuse me, the same standard one experience can be done in standard 10 too, provided the teacher has that subject knowledge. That subject knowledge. If he or she doesn't have that particular subject knowledge, it doesn't work. So material has to be provided to this particular teacher, and I think you guys are doing a great job, and you should start thinking on some of the points which will come in today. And the next important thing which I felt is the teacher's attitude towards acquiring new thought processes. Anyhow, at the end of the day, my management is going to do assessment of mine based on the children's performance in examination. They are not bothered about how my child is performing. What is the feedback from the parent? The parent says, I'm happy to see that my child is enjoying learning. Whatever is happening in the school, he's coming, he's working in the kitchen, he's cutting something, he's putting something, he's adding some sugar, he's adding some salt, he's trying to experiment many things. I think this feedback is somehow getting what you call ignored. So there is no recognition per se as such. And the fifth point, which the last point, which I thought the challenge, which I think based on our little experiences, again, we say the environment is not supporting these practices. The environment is not at all supporting this practice. When you walk into your HOD, what is their HOD? First question in a review meeting is, how much portion still left out for you to complete? The second part, what is happening is that there is no policy which support that this particular, the innovations in the classroom, the new experiences in the classroom is something which we really need to look at it. Because when I was talking to Prabhakar and Murli, because I met both of them at different occasions, and when I was talking to Murli being my student, and I think on a slang he said in one of my conversations with him, he said, "Sir, I have learned more than the subject what you taught, outside the classroom than inside the classroom." Thanks, Murli, for making sure and making a reference in one of the other earlier conversations. But I think I really enjoyed that particular statement, what you said. Because everything what you did outside the classroom gave you the real-time experience to experiment. And today, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're able to organize a program like this, I think that outside the classroom engagement made a lot of sense. And then when I talked to Dr. Prabhakar, and I think he also gave me a lot of things, but he has a B.Ed, he wanted to become a teacher, but then got into a hardcore researcher. And then when he was researching, then he again came back and said, looked at it and said that, okay, fine, let me try to work in bridging the gap. So both these organizations and both these individuals also, try to share their own perspective. So when we try to talk about experiential learning, I would request Murli first and then Dr. Prabhakar also to share what is your story of Prabal and EduBio. And then probably we will take up the discussions in this particular format. And my request to people is that please start making a note of the questions, because this will be important for you to also look for how exactly we are going to work on it. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, before that, I have Veena, who has raised hand. Any questions? Veena, I have unmuted you. Any questions? Veena R. Okay, assuming
No,
no.
sir.
Yes.
No, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Manoj Patidar. Manoj, any questions? All right. So let's. I'll unmute and. All right. Thank you, sir. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for giving us an overview and history of experiential learning in our own ancient history context and Gurukul system, and touching upon how other nations are actually following and imbibing experiential learning as part of the classroom education and not as an after school activity. uh, so as Dr. Senthil said, it was not that I wanted to become an entrepreneur, or it was not that I wanted to get into this craze of startups that is happening in India in the last 3-4 years. But the need was so strong for me to innovate in terms of my own child's learning, that starting 2016, when he started going to school, as I mentioned earlier, there were situations where I would come back from office, and then I would see my wife and my child, sitting on the study table, and my child would be like really struggling to by heart some of the spellings, and especially with math, he used to struggle because there used to be one of the prestigious schools in Bangalore. There used to be math test every Wednesday, Hindi test every Friday, and Monday would start off with a spelling test. And every alternate day when I come back from office in the evening, I expect a tired person coming home to relax. But then my wife and my child would be in that mode of struggling and fighting with each other, and my son would be like, I don't want to do homework, I don't want to by heart spellings. For a child who used to be really, really good in vocabulary, even today he corrects my English. And such a child used to struggle in school tests because there was a pressure system, right? Like that means you have to go prepared. And what actually increased in terms of the, or what amplified this pressure, and I'm sure a lot of you teachers and parents would agree with me, is the peer pressure among parents, right? I think WhatsApp is probably the biggest bane in terms of amplifying this pressure. I mean, we can probably even use the live example of COVID, where so much false information, so much panic is being spread unnecessarily. The same thing happened with my child's education, where unfortunately my wife got into this parents group, and that's where some parent used to post telling my son got 10 out of 10 in spelling and spelling test, and then immediately in the evening my wife would start asking my son, hey, where did you make mistake, let's focus on these spellings. And my child wanted to play with Lego. So this were like some of the things that started showing a pattern. And then I said, I have been extremely successful in my career in the last 20 years, traveled across the globe, and I never had a formal engineering degree. All I did was BSc Computer Science in Christ College. But as Dr. Senthil said, what really enabled me to become successful and later on work with eminent personalities in Bay Area, top CEOs in the world, uh, is that I've learned how to learn, right? For example, a lot of the products that we design at Trouble, I have personally designed a lot, custom designed to help children learn simply. But I never learned design as an engineering course. I never learned anything in a formal education system. But all I had learned along my childhood and in the college was working with, for example, Dr. Senthil Kumaran, where we used to host large national level events, and I used to take up the responsibility of developing, designing certain things, to host the event live, go on the web and things like that. So it was that, you know, that point that if I focus on training my child to learn how to learn things on demand, which is the need of the hour, will that be a good education approach? And that thought that started in 2016 led me to actually decide to take my son out of school in 2017. And the next 3 years have been amazing journey. I wouldn't say that everything was hunky dory. There were lots of struggles, lots of learnings, trying to get him away from screens as much as possible and engaging him. And I would say it has been a very, very interesting journey where today he's part of the learning process. That's how it all started. And in the process, I learned a lot about various pedagogies like the Montessori, the Waldorf pedagogy, the Finland education system, studied the works of people like John Dewey, John Holt, Sir Ken Robinson, amazing personalities who have dealt a lot about this terminology of experiential learning, where the world, in different parts of the world, it is also known as project based learning or problem based learning, or so it is known in different terms, but essentially it all boils down to one single phrase, which is learning by doing, right? If the child is experiencing what he is doing and is learning through that, then there is no need to buy heart or mug up anything, because some of the study I did in psychology also says that when somebody is doing something experientially, it actually becomes something known as episodic memories in human brain, and goes and directly gets stored in hippocampus without a lot of rehearsal that is required. Anything that we learn as factual information, when it gets stored in the brain as short term memory, it requires a lot of rehearsal process for it to get processed and transferred into hippocampus. And that is why we tell children, go and mug up your tables, mug up your things, and for exams we mug up things. So the psychology and the biology of human brain, of how it functions in a multisensorial experiential learning versus how it functions when you read factual content or write factual content and don't really engage yourself kinesthetically, is very, very different. So equipped with all of these, I thought, hey, there's a good opportunity for us to actually make a bigger difference, bigger impact to our own society and our own children around us. And that's how Prabal came into existence. And over the last 7-8 months, we have designed some phenomenal amount of products and software to deliver that seamlessly. And our goal is to not just give the products, sell the products and worry. So we will not talk
Yeah.
about much of that right now, but the goal is that how can we actually make parents as the heroes of their children when they facilitate experiential learning. Our goal is how can we actually enable teachers to become the heroes in the classroom, so that the
Sure.
teachers can facilitate and deliver experiential learning. That is the whole goal of Prabal. And I'm very fortunate to actually find Prabhakar also in this journey. And I would probably hand it off to Senthil and Prabhakar to continue.
Sure. Thanks, Murli. But I think it's a moral of the story, very, very simple and straight that once you have a challenge, then you start innovating things. I think it looks like Prabhal's story is like that. And when I heard Prabhakar also first time, it is all about you. When there is a challenge, I think you need to come out with some solution. So Prabhakar, while you are going to, quickly talk about the EduBio, and then there are some specific questions which people are asking also on the chat, where they are saying we would like some concrete examples of experiential learning in biology. I think we will take that question later, but I surely would like immediately to first, we should get introducing about EduBio. Why did you start EduBio?
Yeah, sure. Uh, so I would like to start by saying a proverb in Kannada. It says, "Bellada saviyannu tindavane balla." That I'm sure this proverb is there in different forms in almost all of our Indian languages. What it
Correct.
means is, I can experience the taste of jaggery, but it is hard to explain. And the only it can be tasted only by experience. So what that means is, experience is very personal. Experience actually, uh, when multiplies with the knowledge, the product becomes wisdom. And what we are trying to achieve through our learning, and all of us are trying to reach that wisdom. It's in a pursuit of wisdom, I would say. And experience becomes so critical. As I'm in medical device and biotechnology industry from last 15 years, I have been hiring students, any fresh graduates. And when I realized that they are uh, energetic, very enthusiastic, they have loads and loads of information, latest technology, but if I ask them simplest of simple questions, they wouldn't have experienced it. And without experience, information becomes baseless and that cannot be used. So that's how I started looking at myself and my career, because I think EduBio skill, like I did not start EduBio skill just as a startup. It is just culmination or convergence of my entire experiences throughout my own student life and professional life. So when I look back, I can see that I used to make science models, charts for my teachers. When I was in 8th standard,
Okay.
I made charts and models which were used to teach like my class. And I was fortunate enough that my father was science teacher, and many other science teachers were involved. And I also made one of my first, our school's first science museum. So if I take a pause and see how did that impact my learning and what made me to go ahead of the curve in research and education, the only
Go ahead.
thing
Go ahead. Yeah.
the only thing that I would say is when I had to build those models for my science museum, probably I wouldn't have stuck to the textbook. I would have read more. I would have spoken to my science teachers during the during the evenings and weekends. And I remember my science teacher used to live we were in a village, and my science teacher used to live in a rented house. And every day evening at 8 o'clock, the fuse used to go off and the lights used to go off. And
Okay.
all thing, if I remember, oh, okay, so those are the things, if they have helped me, they would help everyone. So that's how I started looking at it. Me being a molecular biologist by training, I have seen that most of the biologists unfortunately take up biology because they hate maths, do not like chemistry, and do not understand.
So you're a
So
product of somebody's hatredness. Huh? Somebody hates something, so they like biology, or no choice as such.
yeah, so math is tough, biology is boring, and chemistry is abstract. So where to go? Like so as we say, coding needs to be another language, which every child needs to learn. Biology also is another subject which everybody has to learn. So it's biology particularly doesn't help to score. So that is the reason usually students leave out after 10. But that's not the right thing. We'll go ahead and talk about that. But just to
Sure.
continue my EduWire skill story and quickly wrap this up.
Mhm.
So so there are so many things about biology which we can learn, as Dr. Senthil, you were mentioning lemonade. By making lemonade, there's so much a child can learn. By taking curd and putting a drop of curd in warm milk, the child can learn so much of biology. And taking a buttermilk and churning it, how emulsion forms, there is so much to learn about physics and chemistry. So science is not about jargons, it is not about information. When a child actually makes curd or lemonade or buttermilk or butter, and when they actually retain these experiences with them, and in their higher classes or in primary school or high school, when they hear something called emulsion, that fear of that subject or fear of that unknown word doesn't exist, because they start feeling that, oh, this is very similar, I know it, I have done it, it's very familiar. So that familiarity to through the experiences helps them to imbibe the knowledge. And that
Mhm.
is when we said, okay, there are a lot of things which can be done in the form of products, and that's how EduWire skill came to existence. But one important thing about experience and skills, if I have to connect them, experiences provide skills, but they also demand
Mhm.
skills. And this is a whole cyclic process. I have a skill at one level, and I go through an experience. My existing skill gets enhanced. I acquire a new skill, and that whole cyclic experience actually helps us to learn better. And what EduWire skill is doing is basically bringing innovative learning through our products called bioboxes, which are not only for schools, and we also have products for colleges, research centers, and professionals in industry. What we are trying to connect is, when we talk about skills, in particularly in industry, after undergraduate and postgraduate students complete with their master's degree, and then they realize, oh, I have learned everything, but I'm not getting a job. Why am I not getting a job? Because I don't have the specific skill. Because the skill set which is needed today will not be relevant tomorrow, which is happening to the students now. So then they go ahead and start talking about skill. but skills can be encouraged for young children as well. So this is what we have been trying to do in Eduwire Skills.
Good. Thank you. First for the quick introduction and trying to give the whole perspective. But first and the foremost question to both of you is going to be when we try to talk about present students, and one of the challenges which I see with many parents, many teachers, many students is when you say sciences, why there is so much of fear? Why there is so much of fear? And what is that that needs to be done so that they should be able to break a concept and then recreate a concept? So what is your thoughts first, Prabhakar and Murli? Anyone can start from any format.
Yes, if I can start. So fear about I will stick to chemistry and biology.
Okay.
Fear about chemistry and biology are because of two reasons. One, chemistry doesn't use this English because chemistry itself is a language. There are so many words which we cannot even pronounce, and it's hard to remember. It's hard to even, as Murli was saying about spelling, it's even hard to write the actual name of chemical in an English word, right?
Okay.
So forget about the equation. So it's not familiar because nowadays what we see is almost every child around us knows more than 4 or 5 languages, just because we are in a cosmopolitan environment. But when we talk about sciences, there's still a little bit of fear left because the languages used in chemistry and biology are not English, and they are like italics or the chemical languages, which are more scientific and jargon based. That's one reason. And another thing I would say is when we talk about learning sciences, we end up, say, pumping in too many terminologies on a child's brain. And first of all, I can't even hear the word properly, pronounce the word properly, do not even understand the meaning of it. And those are abstract concepts, just like algebra. It's very abstract. Arithmetic might be, it can be tangible, but algebra is not. But chemistry is more tougher than algebra because it's a very abstract topic. That's one. And biology is boring. It's boring, unfortunately.
Or is it easily scorable? Easily scorable in the examination. Would you like to put it like that?
It is not easily scorable after 10.
Okay.
So most
but before that, yes.
Before 10th, yes, because you just need to remember and write up everything you remember.
Okay.
But let's talk about why students are afraid of it. They're afraid of it, I believe, is those tiny little experiences or tiny little insightful surprise-based learnings which we can go through, just like observing a say orange fruit which is forgotten in a corner of a kitchen. If it gets fungus, it starts rotting. But what do? We just take it out and throw. But there is so much of chemistry into it. There's so much of biology into it. Making curd, doing tea, everything around us. Unfortunately, the education, when we talk about the formal education, we forget certain important things, which is, I believe, small changes can make big difference. If we try to focus on small little things like making a curd, making a lemonade, and there are so many examples we can go on. So once a child goes through those examples, it's like a situation where the child is ready to imbibe more information. And until a child is ready to imbibe more information, that fear will remain, and that will continue to have that distance. So these are my thoughts on why.
Okay, first, so biology, you made it very, very clear. It is, the particular chemistry, what you made a very interesting fact is, I think knowing a language, it is not with regard to that, because what people are already researching is that there's a direct connotation between the languages and the scores. See, the languages and the scores in mathematics. There's a lot of good research which has been done on this particular space. That if you don't understand the science, if you don't even to understand a statement problem, particularly the teachers will surely agree with me that when we try to talk about statement problems in mathematics, children struggle quite a lot because they are not even good in English. So what I completely agree with you on this particular part of it. And second is that we may have textbooks titled as everyday science, but it is not everyday science. As you said, it is all about rote learning and then trying to vomit out in the assessments. Yes, Murli.
Yeah. So science is very, very dear to me uh, because one, I'm now a designer, right? So me being a designer, now I'm able to appreciate science 20 years after I left college much more than I ever enjoyed and appreciated science when I was in school or college. The main reason is because in school and college we worry more about semantics, right? Um what I've realized in my 20 years of career in working for high technology companies and building products, world class products, is that you don't get black and white answer, or you don't get black and white working output for anything, right? The reason is that, even for example, even if I have to take a rocket launch by ISRO, which gets launched successfully most of the times, are PSLVs and GSLVs, there are like a battalion of scientists sitting in the room and trying to maneuver the rocket as it navigates through all the atmospheric conditions, climatic conditions. They would have studied all these climatic conditions months in advance, and come up with models, forecast everything. But the specific time at which the rocket was launched, nobody can predict how the climate will change. And that is why there are hundreds of scientists sitting in the control center, operators sitting in the control center, trying to maneuver the rocket as it goes into the orbit, right? That's a perfect example to say that there is no such thing as a perfect result for an experiment or a lab session. Unfortunately, in our school system, we expect everything to be perfect result, right? We say, okay, if a child is doing electromagnetic experiment and this is the length of the wire we are giving, then the output should be 2 volts or 3 volts, right? When the expectation is set such that the expectation has to lie in this output range, then the child struggles, right? Then he starts developing a fear that, hey, I'm doing this experiment for 2 hours, 3 hours, and I'm not getting 2 volts, I'm only getting 1.8 volts, I'm only getting that is because when the person who wrote that book, the person, when he designed that experiment and took some results, the wire he would have used, what we call as 30 gauge wire, or 30 micron wire, and maybe what is there in the lab, in physics lab in school, is maybe 35 micron wire,
I
right?
completely agree with you, Murli, because what we have seen is when you go to schools also, particularly the screw gauge and vernier caliper data never gets right in the schools. The
Right.
teacher says, he put it closest and just go ahead and do it. That's the right answer. So we are never able to experience the reality, what you are trying to say. I completely
Right.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to conclude, that what happens is that when children don't get the right results, and they will fear that they will lose marks because of that. They'll be failed in practicals, or they'll fail in theory because they didn't get the expected result. That is when they start cooking up results, right? When they start cooking up results because of fear, then they have never really experienced what real research or real science is, right? Because science is all about experimentation and getting results that will never be same for two students. But if you really see in the records that are submitted by class students, there will be at least a dozen students who would have the same answer, right? So that
Correct.
fear of not getting the right answer and not getting a tick mark and not getting good marks in your exams or in your lab sessions, when students start developing that fear, then once your brain the fear is handled by our limbic brain system, right, which is amygdala. And it's a very limbic brain system where once there is fear, the only response that humans have is fight or flight, right? Either they run away from that, or they try to fight it out. And once a student enters in that fight or flight mode with respect to any subject, it is very, very difficult to get that student back to love that subject, unless there is a great teacher who comes and develops that love for that subject through his or her way of teaching.
So this is where I think the students basically love the teacher and then start loving the subject. And for a teacher, if the subject knowledge is not right, subject knowledge is not right. I think that's what has came out from both of you. Is if the teacher is not having the right subject knowledge and contextualizing it to different environment, I think that particular concept will be lived always living as only as a concept. It will never get into a actualization part of it. And I think thank you very much for putting this particular perspectives into place. Because when everybody is talking about the subject depth and contextualization, we also really need to see that what is that we are, why people are making so much of noise about, oh, skills not there, skills not there, this is not there, that is not there. And when you try to look at different skill sets, different thought processes, what are your thoughts per se as such when you are looking at it from your two subjects? That what is the future skills that will be required? There is OECD which has done a lot of study. I'm not getting into the OECD part of it. The World Economic Forum is talking about different kind of skill sets, particularly when we try to talk about this generation of people. And so, just for the sake of people who have joined this, OECD has talked about what are the future skills. And if you can do a little Google, or if not, then you send a mail to Prabal, we will be happy to share that complete document with you, how exactly it could be done. But because we don't want to make it more theory, more into hands-on. So, what is your thoughts? Both of you can quickly share on the skill part of it. You know how this is going to impact the future skills, learning by doing or experiential learning.
Yeah, let me start on that, and then I'll hand it off to Dr. Prabhakar. So, just to set the little bit background, um, for example, I was one of the first engineers to actually work on Android phones way back in 2007 when Samsung was, working on Android mobile devices, right? And why I bring that into context is because starting 2007 up to now if you see it is like 13 years. And if you take the previous innovations that have happened, either in terms of telephone, right from the time, Graham Bell invented the first telephone until the point where, we used to wait for years together to get a BSNL connection, and to the point where the landline systems got replaced by mobile phones. And now the feature mobile phones that were there until 2014-15 completely vanished, and now it's only smartphones. If you really see the compression of time gap, right? 100 plus years of innovation got replaced within 10 years, within a decade. The same thing can be applied for any other feature. Like, look at the music industry, the record industry that was evolving from your, discs to, tapes probably lived for almost 40 years. Of course, the size of the tapes would have varied, but tapes lived for 40, 50 years, and finally just got replaced by MP3 players, within a span of 10 years. And now MP3 players are completely replaced by some smartphones, right? So I can go on and on in terms of examples. I can take automobile industry, which moved from carburetor engines to MPFA engines and moving to electric cars. I can talk about movie industry, where software companies like Amazon and Netflix have started producing original movies where they had nothing to do with movie production. So you can take any such field and you will see that it has been disrupted by technology, right?
So,
And
yeah.
if we are going to continue in the same pace, and one of the question I had posed, to all the participants in the document I shared yesterday was that, name three skills that would probably, or three jobs that would not exist by 2030, right? The reason I asked is that because today India became ITBT. We use that name ITBT, and BPO was a big thing, right? Like 2010 time frame, 2000 up to 2015, everybody could get a job. Anybody who's studied computer science, electronics, doesn't get a job as programmer or anything, could still get a job in a call center, provide technical support. Where is all that now, right? Even the lowest end of engineers who did not perform well in academics managed a job of 30,000 rupees or 40,000 rupees. They're gone. Where have they gone? It's been replaced by artificial intelligence and chatbots. So for all you know, if you are using an app and you have ordered food and the food has not showed up on time, and you are talking to customer support on your mobile phone through chat, it's not a human who's sitting on the other end. It is actually a chatbot, right?
Correct.
So
Hmm.
if I extrapolate this to 2030, there would be many jobs that would go. For example, if electric cars come, would the mechanics, would the engineers of today even be relevant? I'll tell you why. A MPFI engine or a mechanical or a petrol car today has almost 1,500 parts in the engine itself, right? The engine chamber, if you open, there are 1,500 to 2,000 parts, be it a small screw nut to all the way to complex pistons and all of that. A Tesla car exactly has 18 moving parts, right? An electric car has 18 moving parts, all the way from 2,000 odd moving engine parts to just 18, right? Now, Imagine all the industries who are providing supply chain ecosystem to companies like Hyundai and TVS and all of these who are providing nuts and bolts and everything. What will they do when all your car has 18 moving parts? So where will all those professions go? So when Narendra Modi said that we should move to two-wheeler electric two-wheelers by 2025, the entire industry pushed back. Why? Because of job losses. If every bike becomes an electric bike, then the entire ecosystem that is thriving on this petrol based two wheelers will die. So
But
these are
maybe
some of the
Murli, I think
examples.
one thing which I would like to just emphasize here, that there is something called as the environment also, which kind of brings in pressure also to acquire a skill. Now, if
Right.
you go to a place like Agra and you get down at the railway station, you will find that fellow who is driving rickshaw may know 5 or 6 languages which you and I may not be able to know, or even speak, because he has a survival issue, and then probably he will be able to acquire. But as you rightly said, I think we need to put a lot of structures into it to basically get the right thought processes as such. So I appreciate that. Yes, Prabhakar, what is your thought processes on the skill part of it, particularly with biology and so
Yeah.
many things which is coming up?
So when we talk about biology and chemistry, basically from a skill and job perspective, it's healthcare, agriculture, and biopharma. These are the typical things which are on the top that I can think of. So
Mhm.
let me talk about healthcare, how it is changing, how technology is changing, and how skills are changing. Um, AI, artificial intelligence based tools and technologies for diagnostics as well as healthcare have just started emerging, have not yet penetrated, but there are many companies who have already started doing that. And now, most of the students who are enrolling for PhD in molecular biology are not graduates in biology. They are computer science students. That's a very interesting thing. And that's
Yeah.
very real, which has been happening. So
Okay.
why are computer science students learning biology suddenly, who did not choose biology in their 12th standard? It's just because there is a demand and they want to solve a problem because they are experts in computer science. But now, without understanding the domain of healthcare and diagnostics, they won't be able to solve that problem. They are learning those skills. And most of the time, what we have been, at least in our generation, when I graduated, so that the chemistry and biology and mathematics and all these subjects were watertight compartments. There were no convergence among the subjects. But now it's not like that. So
Linkages are there.
yeah, there are so many cross linkages. Everybody has to, like, it's all about upskilling ourselves and acquiring new skills. Because what is the most important thing about learning in schools is about how to learn rather than the subject itself. Because if we learn how to learn, we can adapt to the new skill situation. Because I think we all of us have gone through in medical, AI is coming in, and in agriculture itself, there is so many tools and technologies are coming in, and biopharma, even the new drugs are actually discovered by a software rather than by scientists. So it's not that suddenly a lot of people are going to go jobless, but all of them are compelled to acquire new skills because there is a need, and that we have been seeing that enormously happening in healthcare industry.
So what you are trying to give a very important point is the interlinking of the subjects,
Yes.
math with science. Because today what we find is the progressive schools have already started offering. Because see, the economics of education doesn't allow them, science students to be given an economics as a paper to be given. But whereas the board allows this, but the school, because of the economics of it, there are progressive schools which are doing certain things like this, but not all schools are doing it. So it is very important that the cross-curricular link, which has also come up as one of the concerns, I think is important. Just a quick question of, we are in a COVID era. What is the kind of things you guys are trying to do in that particular? Is there something which is happening in the edu biases also with regard to the COVID-19 and so much of
Yes.
challenges?
We have already developed few technologies, and we have been asked by the central government and Karnataka government to sorry. Okay. to deploy a technology. And I would like to tell you how, being a biologist, I'm using something which I have never learned, which is basically a hardcore physics-based tool, which is not available in chemistry or biology laboratory. So I think my PhD experience helped me to learn that. And education, Swami Vivekananda beautifully said, like 150 years back, education is initiation. And when we learn how to learn, that has helped me to develop COVID technology very quickly. We had 2 weeks to develop a new technology and go ahead and deploy. So that's exactly what we are trying to do. And my comfort to get into uncertainty just because of entrepreneurship as well, and not sticking to what I learned as a biologist, I said, okay, this is a problem. There's a problem. Let me solve. So we started solving it. We used 10% of our understanding of molecular biology. Everything else was quickly learned over a period of like 2 to 3 weeks.
Good. I think congratulations. I think
So,
we really appreciate the contribution done by your organization to this particular scenario. But the message to all the participants is very, very simple, that if you have the basics right,
Yeah.
if you have the basics right and you try to put that together, and this is where the experiential learning basically helps. Because the other day I was talking to another organization called as Fabricana. They are the people who used to make the exhibition, prefabricated stalls they are making. And when government came forward and said that we wanted to have something on the road to have testing zones to be created, I think it was quite wonderful. Manjunath, who is a good friend, he had sent me some pictures. He says, see, Hasendal, how quickly with a prefabricated stall, they are able to create testing centers with a hole where the wash machine can be put, the hands can be put, the material can be collected. I think this is where I think the quick adaptability helps quite a lot to all of us. So coming to the last part of the whole thought process is, because you are part of an ecosystem. You can't live alone. You cannot live alone and say that, no, I'm going to change the world sitting in one particular room. Excuse me, it is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You have to work with schools, you have to work with colleges, you have to work with the corporates. So when you are working with all of them, what is your what do you think is the challenge which is coming in, and what is the positive thing that is coming to both of you from the experiential angle part of it? I'm purely looking from the experiences, because I've also started getting questions, like one question which has already come from Matthew KJ. Uh, I think he's from Mysore. While it is absolutely important for us to move from the traditional method of teaching learning to more hands-on approach, it looks like either the teaching community is resistant to embrace the change, or given inadequate training and or our appreciation for experimenting. How do you suggest to address this issue? Matthew, I'll surely answer this particular question, but I would like these two people who are in ground, because I will give you surely experiences from the implementation in the school, but I would like both of these, them to basically share their experience when you went to a school, when you went to a teacher. What are the few questions, challenging questions which are asked, and why do you think they are not willing to implement anything in their schools?
yeah. So let me start on that. So there are, it's both the system and why, teachers also struggle a bit. From the system point of view, I would highly encourage that the recognition and rewarding students for learning should not be based on the end outcome, right?
Correct.
When you say that, you are only rewarded for the amount of marks you score in theory or practicals, then the entire learning process becomes insignificant, right? But when we say that, no, your entire learning, I'm not talking about the monthly tests or weekly tests. It's not just saying that, hey, we are going to accumulate all the marks that we are going to get every month, and then, so what I'm saying is that the effort they are putting in to do something like that, be it considering the effort that teachers put in towards learning, or be it the effort that students put in towards learning for experiential learning, the process is very, very important for experiential learning, right? It cannot be the just end the outcome. The second point that is very, very important, and one of the things that I did in terms of research on why experiential learning is not being so successfully implemented in schools in India, is that the products are not mature enough, or they're not designed to be used in a classroom, right? The way I would like to see India 5 years, 10 years from now is that there should not be something known as a theory class, and there should not be something called as a lab session at the end of 2 weeks of theory class. right? Because if you're really drawing a hard line between theory and practicals, it becomes difficult to embrace experiential learning, right? And this is where the product design, and this is where the maturity and understanding of how a product should be designed is very, very important. And this again goes back to that we do not have enough designers in educational industry. We have a lot of companies in edtechs who are designing, who are building softwares like learning management systems, who are building apps to digitize the existing curriculum and content. But where is innovation in product design that is very, very simple to be executed in a class, right? I'll give you a simple example. I have something here. If there are high school teachers and principals in high school, is we have all studied about things like for example, Bernoulli's principle, right? In physics, Bernoulli's principle is a one line statement that states that as your velocity increases, your pressure decreases. But how do you experientially show, how does a teacher experientially show that live in a classroom and hand something out to children in a live session where children can also experience it as a theory session is going on, right? It is not that we spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks studying one theory concept and go to a lab session at the end of 2 weeks and do one experiment and assume that we have got the results, right? I'll give a simple example. Bernoulli's principle or Bernoulli's theorem is what is really applicable, when you see roofs flying off houses due to a storm, right? When there is storm, especially in the US, some of the parts like Texas and all, where the temperature difference increases drastically and a storm is created and it blows the roofs off homes. Why does that happen? Because of Bernoulli's theorem. Can we show this to students live in a class and can they experience it? So this is a very, very simple product that the team has designed in Prabal, and I'll show you a simple thing, right? So for example, this is a very small cylindrical, wooden object, very smooth on the inside, and this is like a piston. It's like a piston in your, two-wheeler or car, that kind of pumps. So if I have to tell that, can someone apply Bernoulli's principle to this to take this out, right? Without really tilting or without doing any physical jugglery. It's a very simple, I can demonstrate it, right? So when I blew this whole thing came out. Why? Because this is exactly where Bernoulli's principle came into play. Why? Because when I blew air, it went at a very high velocity on the surface. And because of the geometrical shape of the surface, the air kind of went little lower and then it created a low pressure under the piston, right? Can we design lot of these kind of simple things that are really relevant in a classroom environment? I think this is where India really is behind. And this is where I decided, hey, we have to put a lot of the, like, for example, when I was working in Samsung and we were working on the first Android phone, we were worrying about, the curvature of the screen corner, right? They used to invest multi-million dollars just to get the corner right on the Galaxy phone. If we are able to put that level of emphasis on designing educational experiential learning products that are relevant in a classroom, I think we'll do great, right?
So,
And teachers will be able to learn.
Yeah, Murli, you just showed that particular thing. Can you pick out with your hand itself to show the differentiation, how the teacher can, because see, at the end of the day, there are a lot of teachers and principals who are attending. So my request to you is that you should also try to create interest in the subject. Now you showed a Bernoulli's principle, you just blew it off. Now, how do I engage is something very, very interesting. So why don't you ask people to show them how they can they pick it up from the hand? So can you just show that particular part of it to the participants? And just ask them, is it possible to pick it up? Why don't you try it and show it to them? Why don't you try to remove that with your hand?
Yeah, it can't be removed. You can't even hold it.
Correct. So you are not
The
able
only way it can be removed is by tilting it down.
So this is where what happens, the teachers have to create that interest in the subject by using some live material, because somebody has also said that we want some concrete examples. When one of the researchers, one of the villages, where the science teacher was asked a question, sir, you are talking so much about intestine, how does the intestine looks like? So what this particular teacher did was, he was very simple. So what he did, he took a one of the noodles and he boiled them, quick boiling. He poured some hot water, he kept it, and he said, just wait here, what will happen? And after some time, when it became a little soft, he said, now you touch and feel, because many things have to be felt to actually know how exactly things are. And this is where I think what I thought, I think it is a very good, that example what you just shared, a Bernoulli's principle. If a child is struggling to open it, then you say, okay, now let me do a magic. And this is where I think the teacher's creativity in presentation of the concept, knowing the subject knowledge and connecting it to the real scenario is something very, very important. Prabhakar, would you like to show some one such example like Murli, whatever he has shown?
I'd like to add a couple of. So the conventional theoretical classes are linear, where teacher delivers, students listens, and mostly passive. But experiential learning, when we were talking about, is there any resistance about accepting the experiential learning in the classroom, and what are the constraints that teachers and school management faces to implement experiential learning in schools, in classrooms? Because classroom is a constrained environment because of time and resources and all those things. But the whole rationale is very different. Classroom is set up for one-way learning, which is linear learning, but experiential learning is non-linear. So okay, when we talk about experiential learning, I'm not only learning from teacher, I'm also learning from my peer. I'm also teaching my peer. Where, okay, assume we are 10 students, 10 children, where everybody is doing one activity. As a child, if I observe how that another boy or girl is doing, I may pick up new skill just by observing. That can be a problem-solving skill. And in a group, some might fail doing the activity. Like as Murali blew, somebody might not hold it right in front of them and blew somewhere else, or something like maybe blow from top, right? So that failure, learning from failure mode is also very important. So experiential learning doesn't require a complete change in the infrastructure. It just requires a minor, as I mentioned, small changes make big difference. It is just a minor readjustment or change in the mindset. I have something to show. If you can see this.
Yeah, we are able to see that. Go ahead.
So what I'm trying to show with this kind of a setup is a continuous engagement with the biology lesson. So what I have is a plastic bottle. It has water and the lid has a hole and onion. So biology requires patience and also builds patience, because if it's not like a very funful experiment in science where I put flame and colorful flame comes and it's that's much needed. But at the same time, we also need to encourage students to be patient and wait for the results, because results will not happen magically. So if anything like this can be set up, that is what I have done in my home, where a child is supposed to keep on measuring the length of the root, where right now the root is not touching the water, but still the question is, will the root touch the water, and when will it touch? Tomorrow, day after, or a week? So these are the kind of prolonged engagement kind of an activity which can be done in school or even at home. But experiential learning for me, it is more about bringing that small little change in the mindset of learning as a group rather than as an individual. And one more point I would like to say is, when I went to school and tried to show my products, obvious question was, how would it help my students to score better?
Okay.
I appreciate that question, but my answer was, I said, madam, your students will feel more comfortable in answering what they know after doing these kinds of activities.
Yes, so this is one challenge, I think, I think you might have met the science teacher, or the principal may be a science teacher, but when you go to the typically at a leadership level, the other questions are a little different. How expensive is this? How much will it cost me? How much will it work for me? All that is very interesting to look at it. Puri, would you like to add anything else other than the example what he has just shared? You need to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Sorry.
Yeah,
so coming to the collaborative part that Dr. Prabhakar mentioned, see, like we talked about future skills, right? And I'll give a very simple example. See, in the corporate world, what happens is that everything is about the team. Everything is about, getting things done together, right? There is no individual hero in a corporate world, right? In schools, the environment needs to be fostered. And that is why, again, I said it goes back to the product design. right? Why is that we are all hooked onto smartphones today? It's because of the way it is designed, right? So
Mhm.
we are trying to create, like for example, I've got one more setup here. It's a very small setup. It is essentially a setup for it's a solar panel. What we call it as is the sun tracking solar. That means the solar panel aligns itself uh, automatically uh, based on the direction in which the sun is moving, right? The reason we do this is because this is used to teach programming. By the way, this is using some small bit called as BBC microbit. This is designed by the UK Education Board in collaboration with Microsoft and BBC, and it is used across all schools in UK. It's mandatory. So it's not that we learn programming only by doing programming in the computer screen, but there are physical ways we can engage to do programming. Why I'm mentioning is that Dr. Prabhakar mentioned about collaboration. In a bench, like if there are three students sitting, can those three students collaborate to build this? And the way we are designing this is that it should be, easily assemblable, disassemblable in a classroom environment, right? No screws, no tools, nothing. So that design is very important to foster that collaborative learning. And how are we enabling them to fail and learn from failures, right? Because as I said, in real world, there is nothing in which you will succeed in the first attempt,
Correct.
right? Whereas in schools, we have this expectation that the child, the first time he does
First
something,
time, right?
private, correct answers. The first time a child writes an exam, he has to pass with high marks. You know, it requires a transition in that mindset that we expect children to learn from failures. So, are the products encouraging learning from failures as well? That matters, right? And how are we enabling teachers to help children through those failures? So all these matter, that the product has to create that opportunity for collaborative learning, learning from failures, because if you don't fail and don't learn how to get things working, then how will you be successful in the industry in future, days? Should that start only in college days, or only in your PhD thesis days, only in master's days, or can it start from school education itself?
Sure.
Is the focus,
So
right?
yeah,
So
so
this
I
is
have
where
Kalinga who, yeah, I have Kalinga who has raised hand. Kalinga, can you unmute yourself? And I'm unmuting you. Can you please go ahead and ask your question? Kalinga Raju, do you have a question? You raised a hand. Okay.
maybe not.
Okay, fine. Next, Dr. Rajesh, you also raised your hand. Manisha Julius Ganesh, can you go ahead and ask your question? Manisha.
Sure. I actually wanted to know, I'm quite interested in all these things. I wanted to know how it can be used in languages while teaching languages. We had some examples for sciences, but how can teachers implement it while coming to languages like English, Hindi, French, and all those things in schools?
Okay, fine. Would you guys like to react, or should I get into answering it?
Very honestly, that is not my area of specialization, so I would be happy if you can take that, sir.
Okay, fine. Just to help people to understand that when you try to talk from the languages and social sciences, particularly people have this as a myth saying that in languages and social science it cannot be done. No, I'll give you a simple example of phenomena-based learning part of it, and that's where I think you really need to understand, appreciate how exactly the new thought process, the new way to look at things. Now, when we go for a educational trip, most of us go for an educational trip. We take the children to one resort or to a waterfall and come back. But even before going for this particular trip, are we giving them a single sheet of paper where we are asking them what to look for in that particular place and how to convert them into language, how to make them into thought processes to be connected into a statements. And that's where I think expression needs to come in. This is one part of it. Second is particularly languages. When we try to look at it, we are just trying to say that, okay, the child should handwriting. We are more bothered about cursive handwriting in the early years rather than trying to understand the expression of that particular child is important. The third method which you can actually look at is that please start setting some standards for the language department, where you should also start looking at saying that can every child in grade 3 will be able to write a couplet, a poem with 2 lines, a poem with 2 lines, and then make sure that every child in that particular grade is trying to follow, at least it's a form of expression. Because That is how the acquiring a language through, multiple tools, through multiple, talking tom kind of a thing, which is available with technology, which you can use it. And there are different other ways. And Manisha, if you can, come offline, I'll be more than happy to give you examples, trying to contain myself with the more examples part of it. But I just gave you some 2, 3 examples that it is doable. It is doable and possible, because in one particular school where we are working, because we work with multiple schools across the country, one particular department, Punjabi department to be very precise, in that school, was feeling that they were not even being bothered about it. But today, when these language department came together, took up a concept of brain drain, which is happening in Punjab quite a lot, and they wanted to raise awareness on it. They used a modern method. A modern method is nothing but a flash mob kind of a thing, and then reacted on it. And that, I think, was something which was very interesting, which was done by them. And we really need to see how, the whole, it came into so nice that the Punjabi department came out with a Punjabi Gidda kind of a thing, with the a flash mob kind of using the language, students expressing why the language is important. What's called brain drain was important, but again, use the language as a very, very important source. But trying to communicate, and if the whole exercise was done first inside, where the students were asked to understand, come back, rewrite, work on it, and then come out with their own script. Yes, but for all this, the facilitation has to be done by the teacher. If the teacher is not motivated, teacher doesn't know how exactly to play with the languages, I think it will be very, very difficult. Coming to social sciences, because I've touched a little bit in languages, let me come into social sciences also. How many of us are actually asking our children, when you go to Taj Mahal, are you looking at the architect? Are you looking at the mathematics of it? Is there a symmetry there? Is there something called as what is the script which is written? Why the script in Taj is at one particular level? When you stand and look at the Taj, all the different designs are maybe they look very, very similar. So where exactly the weaving, how exactly the design size is increasing as the height is increasing. So the person which is actually looking at it is actually, able to understand. And Manisha, I just wanted to tell you the last example is, go back and look at, if you are are you a school teacher, by the way?
No, sir, I'm not a school teacher, but I teach French for professionals.
Okay, fine. So if you teach French, surely coming to that, I think there it is more of action oriented and activity oriented when you try to talk at that particular level. But in early, in the phases of school, when you go and look at the notice board, most of the notice board font size is around 14. 14 font size of 12 is the 14 size which they use it in the printouts and put it as a notice. But have you ever bothered whether the child is, why I have not seen the notice board? Madam, I can't see, because this is where what people like us have done is, we make the teachers to stand on their knees and ask them to read the circular. And they say, sir, it is very difficult. So what exactly needs to be done? So if a notice board has to be designed and a notice has to be put in the school, based on the age appropriate, the method also has to be used. So the real-time experience first the teacher needs to have, and then the student needs to look at it. Right. So this is something which I thought. Yes, Rajesh, you had raised, you have a question, or it was just...
Yeah, sir, it's fantastic to have both of them coming on to the panel. And this is where I always felt like as a principal that we should be having this kind of education in the school. But to be honest, how many schools can arrange this kind of TLM?
Rajesh, what is there in this kind of a TLM to be bought? I don't think it is going to be about the financials and expectations. It's all about the willingness to do it. If I have to teach, sure. See, if I just take a minute from Prabhakar, if I say I cut the onion and show the symmetry in it, can I show how much expensive is it going to be? Rajesh, probably you really need to tell me.
No, not money only. It is not the money. I'm not talking about the money, sir. But the kind of because the B.Ed trained teachers are not capable of bringing out this kind of thing.
Completely, I agree completely with you. This is where even at TLC we have experimenting something new. I'll tell you. What we have done is we are trying to celebrate 9 days of only pedagogies happening somewhere from 27th till May 6th. If a teacher and schools are interested, please do join. We will talk about it later, Rajesh. Thank you very much.
I think
Prabhakar, let me just ask Prabhakar, raise the question, and Murli, I'll come to you. Yeah,
Yeah.
Prabhakar, go ahead.
I,
Prabhakar, go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to add a point to Manisha's question. Murli and I have been talking more about collaboration, because that's the key thing. It's all about teamwork, and when we talk about teamwork among students, I think we should also talk about teamwork among the teachers. And if a language teacher gives an essay writing topic, why not that topic? Or a social science teacher gives essay writing topic, why not write a brief biography of a scientist? Why not write an essay about experiments done at home? So it is actually language, but takes science as a subject. I think there needs to be a lot of collaborated activities too. Yeah.
Correct. Yes, Murli.
Yeah, so to ask Dr. Rajesh Sharma's question, uh, the one of the things that I observed, when I was doing my research on, why experiential learning is not becoming successful in India, is to the point, as you said, right? Like how we have to enable teachers, right? The biggest gap I found in our current educational technology companies is everyone wants to sell products, right? Well, if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm establishing a company, even I would want to sell products. But who are the real stakeholders at the end of the day for the products to be successful and for the product to have an impact, right? It's not me, it's not the products, it's not the school owners or the school management or the school principals. It's ultimately the parents and the teachers, right? So what are you doing as an entrepreneur to design your products and your content in such a way that you are actually enabling facilitation of delivery of that content and material, right? So that's the foundational building blocks that we set out as for Prabal, where we said, hey, if you have to really make an impact with these products, the two key stakeholders that need to be enabled are parents and teachers, right? So in all the products that we develop, we actually induce failures by design, right? We make sure that children fail at certain points, right, by design. But we enable the teachers with that knowledge, with the videos, and we also bring teachers onto Prabal platform for training on how to deliver that content, right? And then we say, hey, look, dear parent and dear teacher, this is where your children will fail while doing this experiment and while learning, and this is how you facilitate them to go beyond that failure if they are not able to experientially get past that failure, right? So we want to enable teachers and parents in such a way that they know how to facilitate, because one of the things that we take pride in saying is that we want to make parents and teachers as the heroes of their children, right? Today I know that a lot of teachers fear, because a lot of children are over informed with a lot of information, right? And if the teachers have done their BA 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and have not kept up themselves, it's very difficult to deal with that information, right? Teachers should be in a position to curate that information and give meaningful knowledge to that child. We want to enable teachers and parents to be able to do that, right?
And I would also recommend, Rajesh, and also organizations like Prabal and Bio, that I think you should encourage principals like Rajesh is very, very progressive principal, whom I know also personally. What I would recommend is, if your teachers have certain simple methods, and my request to these two entrepreneurs also, why don't you invite schools to come up with their own smaller teaching aids, which with the given minimum resources what is being done? Because what happens, they may create, but it just gets an idea and it gets killed. And this is where I think entrepreneurs like you play a very, very important role in trying to take the teacher's input, give a credit to the teacher that this particular product got initiated, created, thought process of the teacher. And I would like all the principals to please use such a platform. And I that I play this devil's advocate role of trying to trigger some things which may or may not work, but I am quite confident, and I think I would request Murli and Prabhakar also, please invite schools through this particular forum. If their teachers have done something, why don't you take it up? Because see what happens, in the past, what anything which gets developed in the lab, when it goes to field, it has its own challenges. But anything which has got originated, a problem which has happened in a classroom, and teacher is able to develop a solution, I think we really need to come back to the back to lab, rework on it, and try to make it a good product, and then send it back to school. maybe I think the acceptability may be much more higher. And it's not only you. What I have figured out is many service providers or many companies like yours are struggling to penetrate the schools only because of this reason. They think that they have done their own set of research, but how do you try to look at it? But I have a very long question which has come from Bharti Raja. Good afternoon. I understand from the ongoing discussion, one, trigger points which pushes our speaker to think about experiential learning. Second, speakers and founders had done some underground work on comparison of various learning methodologies. Yes, Finland learning models. Third, designing models for every concepts. Questions from my end. What is this? Is like to hear from our speakers. What are the problem areas identified with existing setup apart from trigger points? What are the problems identified from the existing setup? Okay, let me answer this first and then I'll take the second part by part. First and the foremost thing is that the willingness to try and experiment in a classroom is not there, because again it is a correlated thing. Because I have a syllabus to complete, I have a scores to achieve, I have certain objectives to be achieved. Because my review, the person who is reviewing is not reviewing my efforts in teaching the concept. He's more interested, his first question is, where are you against that total plan, or the annual plan, whatever that you have made. So that is the first problem. The second problem is how only the pre-designed model or products will turn our country younger generation to become creators or getting the creative mindsets. Yes, we really need, and that's where I think my question to organizations like Prabal is that try to create some generic things so that the children can create certain things which are from them. I have a simple question to all the principals who are sitting there. During the COVID time, I think there are schools which have taken some attempt. I know of a school in KRM school in Chennai where they, through their Atal lab, what they have done, how the children can provide solution to COVID. They did an activity. I still need to see what is the results that have come, but schools are taking attempt. Individuals like companies like this, individuals are already doing. The fourth part of his question is, are we trying to achieve here coming up with supplements like vitamins to help the traditional learning methodology? No, we need an overall of the system. Dialogues like this are not only to provide a roadside solution to a puncture which has happened in the system. No, it needs a complete overall. See, first time in the country, we are trying to talk about condensing the syllabus. The CBSE is talking about, the ICSE is talking about, other boards are trying to reduce. And what will happen in the reduction? People are just going to cut chapters. While cutting chapter, if they cut one of the progression properly, the children will have the effect in the future. And that's where I think there are organizations, and Bharti Raja Tamil Selvan, please feel free to send a mail or give me a call. I'll be able to help you to understand more on that. If it is a supplement, how is this going to help people in different ideas? No, it is not a supplement. We need a complete overall of the system, which is important. And as somebody has said, it is all about mindset. It's all about mindset. In a classroom, whether I am wanting to work on this kind of a model is something which really need to be looked at it. And next question, which has come from Guru Prem Kapoor is, we are restricting our children to have knowledge, forgetting that they're born in different age. Do programs to change the mindset? Yes, it is 100% true. Let me, Bharti Raja and Guru Prem, I would like you to look at a school in Vablewadi in near Pune, 23 kilometers from Pune, where I have seen, personally, I have traveled, a fantastic case to actually visit how independent learning is actually happening. Today, this particular school has closed. Please do a little Google on it or request. I will send you the link. Bablewadi, and there is a person by name Dataware who is doing a fantastic job with regard to this. The second thing, you can also go to my Facebook page, and there you can see Jaswinder Singh, where again he has taken his own personal car, put all the science kits into it. Every second Saturday, Sunday, he is in one particular village, helping people to innovate with the products, sharing how science can be fun, sharing how thought processes can be done. So what I'm trying to drive is, it is No, I have just taken two because it was Murli's initiation that we need to spend time on, experiential learning, and Prabhakar kind of complemented it. But my intention, my request to you that there are empty cases. If you really want to go a little more, there are companies which are giving support to schools to work on some of these area. I think I'll be more than happy, take it up and talk about it. Can I have the email ID as a phone number? Yes, I think we will share that. Thank you, wonderful sir. We are ready to follow experiential learning. Syllabus is the greatest concern. I don't know, Galaxy A30. The name is not mentioned. If you can mention your name, I think that will be, to look at it. You should be, not worried about syllabus. Syllabus is something which board gives it. Teachers use shortcut on how to skip chapters, how to prepare for the examination. So get out of it. Shija, please, my request to you, Shija, that is, I think, the number Galaxy A30, which the question is, don't worry about the syllabus. If you internally in your school, please start working on concept progressions, and then try to look at your syllabus, and then try to look at your, books also. Because what happens in many schools, one of the challenges which I've seen, why experiential learning faces, please understand, like a lab kit, textbook is also only a means. Don't try to look at answering all the questions which are given at the end of the textbook. Please don't do that. Please don't, try to look at syllabus. You in the school has to have a concept progression. Try to find out how exactly this can be done. And if you need some more input, I will be more than happy to, because time is something which is running against me. Question to Murli and Prabhakar, are you only sharing product for middle and senior school, or something for primary and kindergarten section? Both of you would like to touch?
Yeah. Yeah, so right now we have products all the way from 6-year-old children, and as I said, we don't design 5 products or 10 products and try to sell that to the entire nation, right? We try to work with, of course, we are trying to design products that are all application based, right? We want to really engage children in a way, they understand the application first. So whether it is a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old, we see what are the kind of things that a 6-year-old child can appreciate, and it also depends a lot. Like an urban 6-year-old may not be the same as a semi-urban or a rural area school 6-year-old, because their exposure levels are very, very different. So we really are, we can work with schools to really design custom products to suit their needs, and then provide those material in a way, it is accompanied with academic content and curriculum mapping, so that that can be delivered to respective age group children. So we do cater all the way up to, +1, +2. Right now we are catering up to 15-year-old children, but we will grow in the next 1-2 years.
Good. Prabhakar?
Same here, we have products for primary, high school, and higher secondary. And as a vertical, we also have products for college and research students as well as industry. Just wanted to add that point as well. And I think the uniqueness of EduBicycle and Trouble products, because it is not like peeled banana. It is not oversimplification. It is not like one lesson, one activity, one product. What we are trying to do is we build a comprehensive experience in a form of a design. So these are very unique, and we both are have partnered, and we both are new generation edtech companies, not unlike those companies who have been only making kits. So I went to a shop where I saw a very colorful kit which was called as coin collection kit. So as a young student, I used to do coin collection, stamp collection, and all the matchbox and all those things. But when I opened that box, I saw an album, a plastic album, which had all the slots to put the coins, and I also saw a lot of coins there. So from my point of view, that is not a coin collection, because what is coin collection? I travel to different places, my family travels to different places, they bring together. So we are a new generation of company where we are not trying to put together some stuff in a box. Rather, we are trying to design an experience through a product.
Fine. Okay, and
There is
also just to add one more thing, particularly children, teachers and schools are worried about mathematics. Up to grade primary section, try to use maximum of manipulatives. Even if you're going to have pizza, are we able to talk about pi? Are you able to talk about circle? Are you able to connect it to that? Is something very, very important. And this is where I think the teacher needs to go a step more. The principal needs to make sure that the lesson plan has more of contextualization to day aspects. And please understand, any learning can happen from known to unknown only. Unknown to known, nothing can happen. Okay, and most of the time we use unknown to known, which is a wrong method. Try to first understand what the kid has and then try to move towards it. And when you start moving, and these kind of tools basically help you to connect it quickly. That's how the child is able to go back and try something. Okay, this is something which is one of the things which he's talked about, coin collection. I think in a Dubai school they said that why don't you go to different beaches and then collect different sands, what kind of sands particles are there. It was one of the experiment which was given by one of these schools in Dubai, because children compelled their parent to drive down on a Sunday to a different location, picked up some sand, put it in a plastic cover, brought it back, and then displayed. This is something which is important. So this is something which is a real time situation which is happening. Another example, on roots. Of course, some people have asked some examples specifically for biology. Let me give you one more example of roots. Just try to get a two slits of fiberglass or fiber or a glass transparent thing, put it in a fish tank kind of a thing, reduce it, put some roots, what kind of roots are forming, and tell children to look at what the roots. Because just now Prabhakar talked about keeping an onion and waiting for the roots to come in. Prabhakar, I'll go a step more than that, what you have just said, that you just have a small thin chamber, put the ginger into it and see how the roots comes out of it. Put something else and how the roots comes out of it. And show the children, see, this is how it needs to look at it. And you can replace that. And this is how the real time experience happens. Because I still remember somebody was talking about farming. And in the farming, what they did was they had some husk where you put the seed, and there is a transparent plastic cover around it, and the child is able to see how the small seed is getting into the plant. And in the end, the kit also had something very interesting called as a selfie with your plant, and a beautiful a frame, so which the child can take a picture and put it. So the purpose is not how to engage. The purpose is how to make sure that these concepts are going back to the classroom and then getting connected by the teacher. Because any product like Prabal, like Edu, they can supplement and complement the learning which is happening. They can accelerate the learning. So please remove the myth that it is time consuming. But problem is, I think all teachers sitting here will surely agree with me that our problem is, in lesson plan we have written some 7 steps, and when a Prabal or when a biocom company like this comes and puts a thing into it, sir, how now this is, first of all, we are not able to finish the syllabus. How will we finish the syllabus with this activity? Sorry, the purpose is you have to change your lesson plan, eliminate 3 steps, add this particular real-time experiential education act into it, and then enhance the effectiveness of your lesson. Then only it will be good. Then only you will come out of this myth, which is called as time consuming. There's nothing called as time consuming. It's only our mindset. Okay, so that's something which I think we are running short of time. So just to quickly, I will kind of share a few things. We should move out of comfort zone. My question to Murli sir: how do your son react once you started home tutoring? I think this is the session on experiential learning has indeed become, after listening to all your experiences, I'm eager to know why participants were told to have certain time handy to all of us. Question from Manisha. And Roshni Handa has asked a question. My question to Murli sir: how did your son react to once you started? So Murli, would you like to quickly answer these questions?
Yeah, sure. So I know we are running out of time, but we had told get some materials, and I wanted you all to experience how we can actually make simple like how can we actually make complex subjects very simple through experiential learning, right? For example, I told you all to bring a round object, a rectangular object and a lighter or a candle. You can try it after this session because we are running out of time. But I'll give a simple example, right? If I take a rectangular box like this, and I'll just keep it here. I'm keeping it directly opposite, and if I blow it, right? If I blow it, you can't put off the flame, right? It is because this is blocking the air. Now you can try this after. I keep a round object and I put a flame on the side, right? I don't have to blow hard. I don't have to try. Is this really hard to imbibe in a lesson plan, right? But what can we teach with this? The entire functioning of aircrafts functions on this simple principle, right? Aircraft fly because of this principle. It's called a Coanda effect. And why I'm telling this is because it's directly related to high school physics, which is Bernoulli's principle. Bernoulli's principle, when it acts on aircrafts, cannot really act on its own to lift an aircraft up. It is this effect also that is coming into play. And what is that statement? It essentially says that any fluid has the tendency to stick to the surface if it is a curved surface, right? The cup I wanted you all to bring is essentially to simply explain the same thing. I'm going to just put water in this cup. And I'm going to try to pour this in a bowl, right? Now, all of us would have observed, when we try to share 1/2 coffee in hotel, now we try to pour coffee from one cup to another cup, it spills on the table, right? It's the same thing, right? Now I'm going to try and spill this water, but if you see, instead of coming directly down, it is actually sticking to the surface and coming down, right? The reason it is actually sticking to the surface and coming down is the same principle that we applied with this fire and bottle. So it's essentially these simple things that we want to design as an entire curriculum and then help teachers deliver it better in classroom. Because once children see something, it's not very hard for children to just have a cup and bowl in a classroom and just try pouring, right? It's not complicated at all. When they learn this way, what is happening is that their brains are developing episodic memories. They will, a simple example of an episodic memory is, if I ask all of you, can you remember one instance where, you learned some amazing formula in a classroom 20 years ago? And I don't think any of you will remember that amazing formula 20 years ago. But if I tell you, can you remember one incident where you and your friend stole mangoes from your neighbor's yard or house? Right? You'll probably remember who that friend was. You'll probably remember whether it was summer break or winter break. You'll probably remember whose house it was. And you'll also probably remember which month it was. You may not remember the exact date, but that is because that one simple incident that you did got stored as episodic memory in your brains, whereas the factual learning in a classroom, because of, be it an amazing formula, was just a factual information.
Yes. So with that, I think Murli, we are also running short of, we have exceeded time. Prabhakar, you have just only one point. Anything, one example would you like to add on? You have something on your table?
Yeah. So I would also like to quickly show a couple of our boxes, because I got a lot of questions privately asking to show something. So these are the kind of products we have. The name itself is quite interesting. It's called What Makes Your Fruit Tastier and Wake Up East, Make My Bread. So these are the products which we have made in such a way that it's easy for teachers to actually get all the chemicals required in a box like this, which they can use and give experiential learning experiences to students. And the whole idea is these are designed in such a way that rather than giving one as a complete solution, it actually helps teachers to create more content as well and use it the way they want. It's basically to facilitate, and as Murli has been saying, that we want our teachers to be heroes in front of their students. And what we want to do is we understand the constraints what a teacher has, and we have made these products specifically for biology, chemistry as part of Prabal, that our products can be used by teachers to enhance the learning experiences.
Okay, just to quickly sum up this particular, before I close the session, some of the key points which I thought my takeaway has been and reinforced in many of cases is that People say that there are always seven. So I just thought, let me try to, while everybody is talking, I thought that these are the seven things which I am taking back from the experiential learning session. One is that it enables personalized learning because you know what kind of learning style this particular child has. That's point number one. Two, it accelerates learning. It is not a hindrance to the learning. It is basically accelerating learning. And third is it enhances the engagement levels. It enhances the engagement level because in engagements it should be meaningful. It should be meaningful. People should be able to find and see something, some action happening. But all these three has to be supported in the fourth point, which is known as better rubrics. If you don't have rubrics, you will never be able to assess experiential learning. Because if after every experiment, if child has to sit down and write the whole answer, I think it will not work. It will not work. So we need assessment accuracy with supporting rubrics which needs to be created. The fifth point for takeaway for me is that any experiential learning helps to bridge the gap between the concept and the practice. Concept and practice and variation of practices. That is something very, very important because it is not only bridging the gap here, but how do you try to take it and try it out in other aspects of it. But for all this, I think it's very important. We as an individual, I need to shift my mindset. I need to shift my mindset because if I am not shifting my mindset from, मैं अपनी सोच नहीं बदल रहा, if I'm not changing my mindset, then I think I'm not going to work on it. And all this can happen conducive environment only. Because if everybody is asking for mark, the mother is asking for mark, the father is asking for marks, the parents are asking for marks, if everybody is asking only for marks, I think it doesn't work like that. Because we really need to understand that all of us as stakeholders of education, we have a very important role of trying to make sure that how exactly can we add value in everybody's thought process, everybody's thinking process, and we have to bridge this particular gap. With that particular note, I think I would like to thank all the participants for taking time on a Sunday, morning, and thanks to COVID again for giving us the opportunity to come together in this kind of a scenario. But a specific thanks to also to that Prabal team and Edu BioSkills for getting me here because I think it was a fun for me to spend some time in the morning with all the participants and everybody. And if there are any specific questions, I think the email IDs are there. And I would request all the schools, I would request all the participants, if you find that there is a very simple experiment done by your teacher, why don't you write? Why don't you write to such organizations? And my request to all these organizations is please give a credit to the school teacher and the school for contributing this into the body of knowledge. Because at the end of the day, that's where I think you should work very closely with the schools, and schools must also try to find ways and opportunity to integrate them into your campuses to make sure that how exactly this can be worked. With that note, thanks Murli, thanks Prabhakar, and thanks to all the participants for inviting me. And I hand over the session back to Murli because he's the host. He invited me. Thanks, Murli. I think I enjoyed completely being part of this particular session. And thanks for those wonderful questions. Yes, Murli, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Senthil. Thanks a lot, sir. And for all the participants, this is a quick summary slide of what is that big gap that we are trying to fill. And as I said, like both me and Dr. Prabhakar, we are driven by purpose, and we entered this, space of education to make an impact due to a very, very personal reasons, right? Both of us here are, very personally reason-driven entrepreneurs who got into this space, by choice. So one of the things we definitely want to, help through experiential learning, and I'm sure as educationalists, as parents, you would all agree with me, is that we as a nation, we are heading towards 2030, which is going to be totally driven by technology and machine learning, artificial intelligence, every sector. Like as Dr. Prabhakar said, the people who are innovating now in the space of healthcare and health sciences are actually computer science graduates, right? And people who are actually designing better cars are also probably people who have done lots of electronics and computer science. So essentially, there's a lot of cross pollination and cross skill sets that are required, and it's very, very important that we start focusing such cross pollination based experiential learning for our children very early on. So that's the gap we are trying to fill. And for parents especially, and for schools, we are actually also will be launching the Prabal app, on which you can order Prabal kits both for schools and at home personally for your children to learn experientially, once the COVID lockdown opens up, through which you can not only order Prabal kits but also Edu Bio Skills kits as well. So this is a quick overview. We have more than 20 products. Dr. Prabhakar has more than 30 products in terms of experiential learning, and mapping curriculum all the way from primary schools to middle schools to high schools. And these are our contact numbers. We would be very happy to answer any query, work with you to design custom curriculum in terms of experiential learning. Because as I said, we are not like one trick pony kind of a thing where we have 5 or 10 products and we want to just sell only those. We are here with the purpose. We want to help teachers and parents facilitate better experiential learning. So we are happy to design custom products based on classroom requirements, based on during school, after school requirements, whatever it is. So feel free to reach out, and thank you all a lot for spending 2 hours on a Sunday. I know it's a lot of time, but we hope we have been able to convey a lot of information and demonstrate certain products that will be helpful in imparting better experiential learning to children both at home and in classroom environment. Any questions, please feel free to mail us on this addresses. Thanks a lot for joining in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay home, stay safe.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.